My name is Lauren Bennett, and for most of my life, I was the daughter who never quite measured up. Picture this, a beautiful crystal ballroom overlooking the Potomac River, chandeliers sparkling like stars, soft jazz playing in the background, and tables dressed in navy blue and gold. It was supposed to be my brother Ryan's biggest night, his promotion to executive vice president at our family's construction company, complete with a major government contract celebration. The room was filled with executives, local politicians, family friends, and people who mattered in our world. Everyone was smiling, laughing, raising glasses. Until my father decided to make his point. I had just found my assigned seat after searching for 10 minutes. There was no name card at any of the main tables. Instead, a small handwritten note sat on a lonely folding chair tucked beside a large black trash can near the catering station. I stood there holding that card, feeling the familiar weight settle in my chest. Then I heard his voice behind me, loud, confident, the same tone he used when closing deals with clients. "Oh good," Lauren found her seat. He clapped my brother Ryan on the back and laughed that big theatrical laugh. "Trash belongs with trash, right? Gotta keep the important tables clear for the real players tonight." The laughter started small, then spread like wildfire. Some people chuckled nervously. Others joined in because they thought it was just Victor being Victor. A few relatives gave me pitying glances but said nothing. Ryan let out an awkward chuckle and looked away, avoiding my eyes. I was 44 years old, a woman who had spent 2 decades negotiating peace in some of the most dangerous corners of the world. And in that moment, I felt like I was 12 again, invisible, inadequate, and somehow always in the way. I could have turned around and walked out. Part of me wanted to, but I didn't. Instead, I pulled out that cheap folding chair, sat down slowly, folded my hands in my lap, and offered a small, calm smile, not because I was weak. Because after all these years, I had learned that true strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply refuses to break. The party continued around me like nothing had happened. Servers skirted past my little corner. Conversations flowed. My father worked the room, beaming with pride as he introduced Ryan to everyone who would listen. But inside, something old and deep stirred, that familiar ache of being the disappointment, the daughter who was never celebrated the way her brother was. I breathed slowly and reminded myself their words don't define me, not anymore. Hey, if you're watching this right now and you've ever felt out of place in your own family, if you've ever smiled through a moment that cut you deep just to keep the peace, I see you. Type "I see you" in the comments. You're not alone in this. About 25 minutes later, the entire atmosphere in the ballroom shifted. Black SUVs with tinted windows pulled up outside. Security personnel stepped out. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Senator Hayes is here." My father straightened his tie so quickly it was almost comical. Ryan adjusted his jacket, suddenly alert. This was the kind of high-level validation my family lived for. The double doors opened. Senator Eleanor Hayes, one of the most powerful and respected voices in foreign affairs, walked in wearing a deep burgundy suit, her silver hair perfectly styled, carrying herself with that quiet authority that didn't need to demand attention. Everyone expected her to head straight to the VIP table near the stage. She didn't. Her eyes scanned the room for just a moment and then locked directly on me. A warm, knowing smile crossed her face. She changed direction and started walking straight toward the trash can, straight toward me. The room went completely still. She stopped right in front of my small table, looked at the trash can, then at the folding chair, and then at me with genuine surprise and respect. "Lauren," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent ballroom, "I really wasn't expecting to find you sitting next to a trash can tonight." And just like that, everything changed. But before I tell you what happened when Senator Hayes reached my table, I need to take you back to where it all really started. I grew up in a beautiful old house just outside Charlottesville, Virginia. White columns, big backyard, the kind of place that looked perfect from the outside. My father, Victor Bennett, built that house with his own hands, or at least that's what he loved to tell people. He started Bennett Construction from nothing and turned it into one of the biggest regional companies in the state. He believed in hard work, discipline, reputation, and legacy. Those are good values. The problem was that he only seemed to see those qualities shining through one of his children, my younger brother Ryan. From the time we were little, the rules were different for us. If Ryan brought home a B on his report card, Dad would take him out for ice cream and tell everyone at dinner how proud he was of his future leader. When I brought home straight A's, he would pat my head and say, "Good job, but why didn't you get that extra credit point?" Ryan made the varsity baseball team in 10th grade. Dad threw a huge barbecue for the whole neighborhood. When I earned a full academic scholarship to the University of Virginia, he simply said, "That's nice, honey. Just make sure you don't get distracted from real life." It wasn't cruel in an obvious way. That's what made it hurt more. It was quiet, consistent, invisible to everyone else. I remember one Christmas when I was 14. I had spent months saving my allowance and doing extra chores to buy Dad a genuine leather tool belt he had admired in a catalog. I wrapped it with a handmade card that said, "For the best dad in the world." Ryan, who was 12 at the time, gave him a cheap coffee mug that said, "World's Greatest Boss." Dad wore that silly mug on his desk for years. The tool belt, I found it in the garage 6 months later, still in the box. Those moments stack up. They become a quiet belief inside you. No matter what I do, it will never be enough. Hey, if you grew up in a family where love felt conditional, where you had to earn every bit of attention while someone else got it freely, I want you to know something. That feeling doesn't mean you were unworthy. It means the people around you had their own limitations. Type conditional love in the comments if this is hitting close to home. My mother tried to balance things. She would pull me aside after dinner, hug me tight, and whisper, "You are so special, Lauren. Don't ever forget that." But she was fighting an uphill battle. Dad's approval was the currency of our house, and Ryan had a monopoly on it. I learned to stop asking for it out loud. I became the quiet achiever, the one who got things done without making noise. I threw myself into school, into books, into anything that gave me a sense of control. Because deep down, even as a teenager, I understood something important. If I couldn't earn my father's pride, I would at least build something that belonged only to me. Looking back now, I realize I spent most of my childhood trying to be perfect enough to be seen, and when that didn't work, I learned to become invisible on purpose. It was safer that way. By the time I graduated high school, the pattern was set. Ryan was the golden boy being groomed to take over the family business. I was the daughter who had her own interests. No one really asked what those interests were, and I stopped offering. That quiet decision shaped the next 20 years of my life more than I could have imagined. Then life delivered a blow that changed everything. I was 25 when my mother passed away from a sudden heart attack. One ordinary Tuesday morning, she was there, making coffee, humming in the kitchen, asking me about my graduate school applications. By evening, she was gone. The house felt like it had lost its heartbeat. Dad changed after that. The grief hardened him. Instead of bringing us closer, it widened the crack between us. He poured every ounce of his remaining energy into Ryan. It was like he decided Ryan was the only legacy that mattered now. I became the daughter who was old enough to handle herself. I still remember the funeral. I stood beside the casket, holding Mom's favorite scarf, trying not to fall apart. Dad had his arm around Ryan the entire time. When people came to offer condolences, they told my brother, "Your father is counting on you now." To me, they said, "You're strong, Lauren. You'll be okay." No one asked how I was really doing, not even Dad. In the months that followed, the favoritism became more obvious. Ryan moved back home to help with the company. Dad started taking him to every business meeting, every client dinner, every golf game. I was finishing my master's degree in conflict resolution and had just landed my first real position with a humanitarian organization. When I told Dad about it over dinner, he nodded absently and said, "That's good. Just don't forget where your real responsibilities lie." I felt invisible in my own grief. Mom had been the only person who truly saw me. Without her, the house became colder. Conversations at dinner revolved around Ryan's future, Ryan's ideas for the company, Ryan's new girlfriend. I sat there most nights quietly eating, nodding at the right moments, and wondering why my pain seemed to matter so little. Hey, if you've ever lost someone who made you feel seen and then watched the people left behind pull even further away, you understand how lonely that kind of grief can be. It's not just missing the person, it's realizing the family you had is changing into something you no longer recognize. If that resonates with you, type "lost and unseen" below. During that time, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would stop waiting for my father's approval. I would build a life so solid that I wouldn't need it. I threw myself into my work with everything I had. Late nights studying negotiation tactics, traveling to conflict zones, learning how to stay calm when everyone else was panicking. Ironically, the skills I developed for high-stakes international crises were the same ones I used to survive my own family dinners. The distance grew year by year. Holidays became performances. I smiled, brought gifts, asked Ryan about his latest successes, and pretended it didn't hurt when Dad barely asked about my life. I told myself I was protecting my peace, but deep down, a small part of me still hoped that one day he would look at me and finally see who I had become. That hope was dangerous, because hope kept me showing up, even when it hurt. By the time Ryan's big promotion ceremony approached, I had spent nearly 2 decades mastering the art of quiet excellence. Almost no one in my family knew the full extent of what I had accomplished, the lives affected, the crises quietly prevented, the respect I had earned in rooms most people would never enter. I almost didn't go to the ceremony. Something in my gut warned me it would reopen old wounds, but that stubborn little hope whispered again, maybe this time will be different. I wish I had listened to my gut. That decision to stop waiting quietly shaped the next 2 decades of my life in ways I never could have predicted. After Mom passed, I finished my master's degree and dove headfirst into the world of international conflict resolution. What started as volunteer work with humanitarian organizations quickly evolved into something much deeper. I joined the State Department's crisis response team, specializing in high-stakes negotiations during political unrest, natural disasters, and border conflicts. Over the years, I coordinated emergency evacuations for thousands of civilians in unstable regions. I sat across from warlords and government officials, translating fear into agreements that saved lives. I helped broker quiet deals that prevented refugee crises from spiraling out of control. Some of the operations I led never made the evening news. That's how effective they were. The public never knew how close we came to disaster. But here's what almost no one in my family knew. I wasn't just working for the government. I had risen to a senior position where my recommendations influenced policy at the highest levels. I had earned the trust of ambassadors, generals, and even a few senators who valued my calm approach under pressure. Yet every time I came home for holidays, the conversation followed the same script. "How's work, Lauren?" Dad would ask. "Busy," I'd reply with a small smile. Then the topic would shift immediately to Ryan's latest construction project, the new contract he closed, or how he was expanding the family business. I learned to let it happen. Sharing details about my work felt pointless when no one seemed genuinely curious, so I kept my world private. I built a beautiful life in Alexandria, a peaceful townhouse filled with books and plants, close friendships with colleagues who respected my expertise, and a relationship with a wonderful man named David who understood the demands of my career. I stopped seeking validation from my family. Instead, I found it in the quiet moments after a successful mission, when a mother in a war-torn country hugged me because her children were safe, or when a young diplomat told me my guidance helped him keep peace in his region. Hey, if you've ever poured your heart into work that matters but kept it hidden from the people closest to you, if you've learned to celebrate your wins alone because sharing them felt pointless, I want you to know you're not alone. Sometimes protecting your light means keeping it away from those who might dim it. Type quiet success in the comments if you understand this feeling. There were moments when the contrast hit me hard. I'd returned from a 3-month deployment in East Africa, exhausted but proud of what we accomplished, only to sit at Sunday dinner listening to Dad praise Ryan for landing a local mall renovation project. I'd smile, nod, and ask Ryan questions to keep the peace. Inside, I reminded myself that my worth didn't depend on their recognition. Over time, that silence became my strength. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped hoping for applause. I simply kept showing up for my work and for myself. I built boundaries that protected my peace while still leaving a small door open, just in case my family ever decided to walk through it. That quiet preparation served me well, because by the time Ryan's promotion ceremony arrived, I had become someone my younger self could only dream of: calm, capable, respected in rooms that mattered. And yet a small, stubborn part of me still wondered if my father would ever truly see it. I kept my success quiet for a very specific reason. It wasn't shame, it wasn't fear of bragging, it was self-protection. After years of watching my achievements get minimized or redirected back to Ryan, I realized something important. Sharing my accomplishments with my family didn't bring connection, it brought comparison. Every time I tried to open up about a difficult negotiation or a successful mission, the conversation would circle back how Ryan was really making a difference in the community, or how Dad's latest business deal was expanding our family legacy. It hurt less to simply say, "We're fine," and move on. So I made a conscious choice. I built 2 versions of my life, the one I lived fully and proudly in my professional world, and the smaller, quieter version I showed my family. It wasn't dishonest. It was survival. I had learned through painful experience that vulnerability with people who don't know how to value you only leads to more disappointment. Hey, if you've ever dimmed your light around family because their reactions made you feel small, if you've mastered the art of saying, "I'm doing okay," when you're actually doing extraordinary things, you understand the emotional labor involved. It's exhausting, but sometimes necessary. Type "protected my peace" if you've walked this path. Over the years, I developed what I now call my silent strategy. I focused on becoming exceptionally good at my work without needing external applause. I practiced staying calm in chaos, a skill that served me both in war zones and at family gatherings. I journaled my experiences instead of sharing them. I celebrated milestones with David and my close friends, not at Sunday dinners, and slowly I stopped hoping for my father's validation, or at least I told myself I had. But hope is stubborn. Even after 2 decades, a small part of me still carried that little girl who wanted her dad to be proud. That's why when the elegant invitation to Ryan's promotion ceremony arrived in the mail, I didn't immediately throw it away. I sat at my kitchen table, tracing the gold lettering with my finger, and felt that familiar pull. Maybe this time, I thought, maybe seeing me show up for him will remind Dad that we're still a family. I knew it was risky. I could feel the old wounds preparing to reopen, but I had also grown stronger. I reminded myself of the truth I had learned in my career. You cannot control how others see you, but you can control how you respond. So I decided to go, not to prove anything, not to fight, but to show up as the woman I had become, with or without their recognition. I chose a simple but elegant black dress. I practiced my calm smile in the mirror. I prepared myself mentally for whatever might happen. Because deep down I understood that this night might test every boundary I had built, and I was ready. Or at least I thought I was. The evening of Ryan's promotion ceremony arrived on a crisp spring night. The crystal ballroom glowed under soft lighting as I pulled up to the valet. I took a deep breath before stepping inside, smoothing down my black dress and reminding myself why I had come. Not for validation, not for confrontation, just to be present as his sister. The room was already buzzing. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter echoed off the high ceilings, and the scent of fresh flowers mixed with expensive cologne. I signed the guest book and began looking for my assigned seat. I checked the main tables once, then twice. My name wasn't there. A helpful server finally pointed me toward the side of the room near the catering station. That's when I saw it. A single folding chair placed awkwardly beside a large black trash can. On the chair sat a small handwritten card with my name scribbled on it. No table, no proper seating, just me and the trash. I stood there holding the card, feeling a familiar sting rise in my throat. For a moment, I wondered if it was a mistake. Then I heard my father's voice cutting through the noise. "Oh, there she is. Lauren found her special spot." He walked over with Ryan beside him, wearing that confident public smile he reserved for important occasions. Several heads turned. He gestured toward the folding chair like he was presenting a grand solution. "Trash belongs with trash, right?" he said loudly, chuckling. "Gotta keep the prime tables clear for the real players tonight. Ryan's big night and all." A wave of laughter rippled through the nearby guests. Some laughed heartily, others offered polite chuckles, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge him. Ryan shifted on his feet and gave a weak smile, avoiding direct eye contact with me. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I didn't flinch. 44 years of learning how to hold my composure in far more dangerous situations kicked in. I looked at my father calmly, searching his eyes for any sign that this was just a bad joke. There wasn't any. This was deliberate. Hey, if you've ever been publicly put in your place by someone who was supposed to love you, if you've felt that moment where the room laughs and you're expected to laugh along, you know how heavy that silence inside you can feel. Type public humiliation if you've been there. Instead of arguing or walking out, I simply nodded, pulled out the folding chair and sat down. The metal was cold. The position made me feel small and out of place, exactly as intended. Servers hurried past me, some giving sympathetic glances but saying nothing. Conversations resumed around the room, but I could feel eyes occasionally drifting my way. My father returned to the main group, clapping people on the back and boasting about Ryan's achievements. Ryan stayed near him, accepting congratulations and occasionally glancing in my direction with what looked like a mix of guilt and discomfort. He never came over. He never offered to switch seats. That silence from him hurt almost as much as my father's word. I sat there quietly, hands folded in my lap, breathing steadily. I watched the lights reflect off the Potomac River through the tall windows and reminded myself of a truth I had learned long ago. Their disrespect says everything about them and nothing about my worth. The evening continued. Appetizers were served, toasts were made, but I remained in my corner beside the trash can, a living reminder of where my father believed I belonged. Little did any of them know that the night was about to shift in a way none of them could have predicted. The laughter after my father's "trash belongs with trash" comment didn't die quickly. It lingered, echoing off the elegant walls like it had permission to stay. Some guests laughed because they genuinely thought it was a harmless family joke. Others laughed because they didn't want to seem awkward. A few older relatives gave me sympathetic half-smiles but quickly looked away, choosing comfort over courage. I sat there on that cheap folding chair, the metal digging slightly into my back, and felt the full weight of the moment. 44 years old. A woman who had negotiated with armed militias in tense border zones. Someone who had stayed calm while rockets whistled overhead. And yet, in this glittering ballroom surrounded by my own family, I felt exposed in a way no conflict zone had ever made me feel. My father didn't stop there. He leaned into the moment, performing for his audience the way he always did when closing a big deal. "Come on, everyone. You know how Lauren is, always off doing her own mysterious things. Tonight is about Ryan. Let's keep the focus where it belongs." He raised his glass toward my brother. "To the future of Bennett Construction." The room toasted. Ryan smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. He glanced at me once more, then turned back to the group, accepting handshakes and congratulations as if nothing uncomfortable had just happened. That was the part that cut deepest, not my father's cruelty, but my brother's silence. The person who had grown up in the same house, who knew exactly how our father operated, chose to stay quiet. I didn't cry, I didn't argue, I simply sat there with my hands resting calmly in my lap, maintaining a gentle smile. Inside, though, old memories flooded in, birthdays where my achievements were barely mentioned, graduations where Dad left early for Ryan's games, conversations that always circled back to the golden sun. This wasn't a new wound, it was an old one being ripped open under bright lights and expensive suits. Hey, if you've ever been the family member who learned to endure public disrespect with grace, if you've sat through moments where people laughed at your expense while you held your head high, I want you to know how incredibly strong you are for surviving that. It takes more courage than most people realize. Type silent strength in the comments if you've carried that weight. For the next 20 minutes, the party moved on as though I were invisible. Servers offered appetizers to everyone except my corner. Conversations flowed freely around the main tables. My father was in his element, loud, charismatic, the proud patriarch. Ryan stayed close to him, soaking up the praise like sunlight. I watched it all from my spot beside the trash can, breathing slowly, reminding myself that this moment did not define me. But something inside me had shifted. For the first time in years, that small, stubborn hope I carried began to feel heavy. Maybe tonight wasn't about keeping the peace. Maybe it was about finally witnessing how little had changed. I had no idea that help, real powerful help, was already on its way through the front doors. The atmosphere in the ballroom grew heavier for me, even as the rest of the room seemed determined to move forward. The jazz band played on, servers wove between tables with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvre, and laughter bounced from one group to another. But in my quiet corner beside the trash can, the air felt different, thinner, colder. My father was thriving. He stood at the center of the largest table near the stage, chest puffed out, telling stories about how he built Bennett Construction from a single truck and sheer willpower. Every few minutes, he'd gesture toward Ryan and say things like, "This is the man who's going to take us to the next level." The guests ate it up. They clapped, they toasted, they congratulated my brother like he had already changed the world. Ryan played his part perfectly. He shook hands, flashed that charming smile our father had taught him, and accepted every compliment with just the right amount of humble gratitude. But every so often, his eyes would drift over to me. For a split second, I'd see it, a flicker of discomfort, maybe even guilt. He knew this wasn't right. He had grown up watching the same patterns I had, yet he never walked over, he never pulled our father aside, he never offered me his own seat, or even a simple, "Hey, this isn't cool." That silence spoke louder than any words. It told me he had chosen comfort over courage, just like always. Hey, if you've ever watched someone you love stay quiet while you were being disrespected, if you've felt the sting of betrayal from a sibling who should have had your back, you know how lonely that kind of moment can be. It's not always loud anger that breaks you. Sometimes it's the quiet choice to look away. Type family silence if this feels familiar. My father, on the other hand, showed no hesitation. He was enjoying himself too much. Every laugh that followed one of his jokes about me seemed to fuel him. At one point, he even walked past my table again, patted the trash can like it was an old friend, and said loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "See? Lauren's always been good at staying out of the spotlight. Perfect spot for her tonight." A few people chuckled again. He winked at me like we were in on the joke together. I held his gaze steadily. I didn't look away. I didn't shrink. I simply sat there with quiet dignity, letting the moment pass through me instead of into me. Inside, though, I felt the old familiar ache mixing with something new, a calm clarity. This was who they were, and this was who I had become. The gap had never been wider. The party continued for another 15 minutes like that, the room full of celebration, my corner full of isolation. No one came to sit with me. No one brought me a proper plate. I was there, but not really there. Then the energy outside the ballroom changed. Black SUVs lined up along the curb, security detail moved with purpose, whispers spread quickly through the crowd. Senator Hayes just arrived, my father's face lit up with excitement. Ryan straightened his tie. This was the kind of powerful connection they had been hoping for all night. None of them realized the night was no longer about Ryan's promotion. It was about to become about something much bigger. Then the double doors at the front of the ballroom opened, and the entire energy in the room shifted in an instant. Black SUVs with government plates had pulled up moments earlier. Security personnel in dark suits moved with quiet efficiency. The whispers started small but spread fast. "Senator Eleanor Hayes is here." My father's face transformed, eyes bright, shoulders back, that proud smile he reserved for the most important clients. Ryan immediately adjusted his jacket and tie, looking like a man who knew this could be the highlight of his night. Senator Hayes walked in alone at first, then with a small detail. She was in her late 50s, elegant in a deep burgundy suit that commanded respect without trying. Silver hair styled perfectly, posture straight but not stiff. She had that rare kind of presence, the kind earned through years of difficult decisions in rooms where one wrong word could cost lives or billions of dollars. She was one of the most influential voices in foreign affairs and crisis management on Capitol Hill. Everyone expected her to head straight to the VIP table near the stage, where the spotlight and the best view waited. That's where the important people belonged, after all. But Senator Hayes didn't follow the script. She paused just inside the entrance, her eyes scanning the room slowly and deliberately. The jazz music seemed to soften, conversations quieted. Then her gaze landed directly on me, sitting alone beside the trash can in my simple black dress. A warm, genuine smile crossed her face. Without hesitation, she changed direction and began walking straight toward me, weaving between the elegant tables as the entire ballroom watched in stunned silence. The sound of her heels on the polished floor was the only thing you could hear. My father's smile froze. Ryan's mouth opened slightly. Guests turned their heads, trying to understand what was happening. Why was one of the most powerful women in Washington walking toward the woman they had all been quietly laughing at just minutes earlier? Senator Hayes stopped right in front of my small folding chair. She looked down at the trash can, then at the handwritten name card, then back at me. Her expression softened with something that looked like a mix of surprise and deep respect. "Lauren Bennett," she said, her voice clear and warm, carrying naturally across the now silent room. "I really wasn't expecting to find you sitting back here like this." She extended her hand. I stood up and shook it firmly, meeting her eyes. In that moment, something inside me steadied. I wasn't alone anymore. Hey, if you've ever had a moment where someone powerful truly saw you, really saw you, when everyone else had looked right past you, know how healing that single glance can be. It doesn't erase the pain, but it reminds you that your worth was never hidden from the right people. Type "seen" in the comments if you've experienced that kind of moment. Senator Hayes turned slightly toward a nearby staff member without raising her voice. "Could we please get Commander Bennett a proper chair? Right here beside me would be perfect." The word "commander" rippled through the room like electricity. My father stepped forward, trying to regain control of the situation. "Senator Hayes, what an incredible honor. My son Ryan is the one being promoted tonight." "I'm aware of your son," she replied politely but firmly, never taking her focus off me, "but I came here tonight in part because of Lauren's extraordinary contributions." The room fell into absolute silence. And that was only the beginning. The silence that followed Senator Hayes' words was deafening. Within seconds, 2 staff members from the venue hurried over carrying a proper banquet chair, upholstered, elegant, matching all the others. Senator Hayes didn't move. She stood right beside my folding chair, waiting patiently, her presence alone commanding the entire room. She personally helped guide the new chair into place right next to hers, not at the VIP table, not near the stage, but directly beside me in what had been my isolated corner. Then she turned to me with genuine warmth. "Please, Lauren, sit with me." I sat down slowly. The difference was immediate. No more cold metal digging into my back, no more feeling like an outsider. Just a comfortable seat and a powerful woman choosing to stand with me in front of everyone who had laughed minutes earlier. My father looked like someone had pulled the rug out from under him. His face went pale, then flushed red. He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally stepped closer. "Senator, we had no idea you knew Lauren," he stammered, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This is all a misunderstanding. We were just having some family fun." "Family fun," Senator Hayes repeated calmly, raising one eyebrow. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "Seating your daughter beside a trash can and announcing that trash belongs with trash doesn't sound like fun to me, Mr. Bennett. It sounds disrespectful." The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the water glasses. Ryan stood frozen a few feet away, his face a mixture of shock and embarrassment. He kept glancing between me and our father, clearly unsure what to do. For the first time that night, he looked truly uncomfortable in his own spotlight. Senator Hayes sat down beside me and motioned for the program to continue, but the focus of the entire ballroom had completely shifted. People were no longer watching the stage, they were watching us. Hey, if you've ever been in a moment where someone finally stood up for you after years of being overlooked, you know that quiet rush of validation. It doesn't erase the past, but it makes you stand a little taller. If this resonates, type "someone stood up" in the comments. She leaned toward me slightly and spoke in a lower voice, though many could still hear. "I've followed your work for years, Commander. Your negotiation tactics in the East Africa stabilization effort were textbook. The way you kept those talks alive when everyone else wanted to walk away, that was masterful." The word "commander" spread through the room again like wildfire. Phones started coming out. Guests whispered to each other. I could see the exact moment my father realized he had made a terrible mistake. He tried one more time. "Senator, my son Ryan has worked incredibly hard on this government contract." "I'm sure he has," she replied politely, "but tonight I'd like to acknowledge someone whose work has impacted far more lives than most people in this room will ever know." She looked at me with real respect, the kind that can't be faked, and in that moment the power in the room had completely flipped. The night was no longer Ryan's. It was mine. Senator Hayes didn't rush. She sat beside me with perfect composure, as if sitting next to a trash can moments ago was the most natural thing in the world. The entire ballroom had gone quiet, the kind of silence where everyone is holding their breath at once. She nodded toward the stage and spoke clearly into the microphone that had been brought over. "Before we continue with the evening's program, I'd like to take a moment to recognize someone whose service to this country has been nothing short of extraordinary." She turned to me. Commander Lauren Bennett has spent over 20 years in international conflict resolution. She has led negotiations that prevented full-scale humanitarian disasters in regions Americans have never heard of. Her work in the Horn of Africa stabilization kept fragile peace agreements alive when the entire international community was ready to abandon them. She has coordinated emergency evacuations for thousands of civilians under incredibly dangerous conditions. And she has done it all with a level of integrity, calm, and strategic brilliance that few people possess. The room was stunned. Phones started lighting up everywhere. People were searching my name right there at their tables. Whispers turned into audible gasps as fragments of my real life began appearing on their screens. My father's face had gone completely white. He stood frozen near the stage, his confident posture crumbling. The man who had just been the center of attention now looked small. Ryan's expression was even worse, a mix of shock, confusion, and something like shame. He kept staring at me as if seeing his sister for the first time. Senator Hayes continued, her voice steady and respectful. What many of you don't know is that Lauren has worked on classified operations that saved countless lives, operations that never made headlines precisely because they succeeded. I've sat in briefings where generals and ambassadors praised her ability to find common ground where none seemed to exist. A retired general who had worked with me years ago stood up from one of the middle tables. "Senator is right," he said loudly. I was on the ground with Commander Bennett during the 2022 border crisis. She walked into a room where two sides hadn't spoken in months and had them talking within hours. She saved hundreds of lives that week. Another colleague, a woman I had worked with on evacuation protocols, stepped forward. She doesn't just negotiate, she protects people, real people, families, children, and she does it without ever seeking credit. The applause started slowly, then built into something louder, more genuine. People who had laughed at me 20 minutes earlier were now standing, clapping, looking at me with completely different eyes. Hey, if you've ever had your entire story rewritten in front of the very people who underestimated you, if you've watched their faces change from mockery to respect in real time, you know how surreal that moment feels. It's not about revenge, it's about truth finally stepping into the light. Type truth revealed if you believe moments like this matter. My father tried to speak, but nothing came out. He sat down heavily in his chair, staring at the floor. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine regret on his face. Not embarrassment, but real, heavy regret. Ryan walked over slowly, his usual confidence gone. He stopped a few feet away, unsure what to say. Senator Hayes placed a gentle hand on my arm. "You've earned this recognition, Lauren, not just tonight, but for every quiet sacrifice you've made." The slideshow that followed, photos from missions I had never shown my family, short video clips of testimonials from people whose lives I had helped, sealed everything. The room watched in complete silence as the truth of who I had become played out on the big screens. And through it all, I sat there calmly, breathing steadily, feeling the weight of 20 years finally being seen. The applause eventually faded, but the shift in the room remained. After the ceremony wrapped up, many guests came over to shake my hand, some apologizing quietly, others simply stunned. Senator Hayes stayed for a while, speaking with me privately before excusing herself. The spotlight finally dimmed, and that's when my father approached. He found me on the quiet terrace overlooking the Potomac River. The night air was cool. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, shoulders slightly hunched, the confident businessman gone. His eyes were red. "Lauren," his voice cracked before he could finish. He stood there for a long moment, struggling to find words. I don't even know where to begin. I turned to face him fully. "Start with the truth, Dad. That's all I've ever wanted." He nodded slowly, tears welling up. "I failed you. As a father, I failed you completely." The words hung between us. For the first time in my life, I heard raw honesty in his voice. "I convinced myself I was being fair," he continued, his voice trembling. "After your mother died, I was terrified. I poured everything into Ryan because he reminded me of myself, loud, outgoing, easy to understand. You were always so independent, so quiet in your achievements. I told myself you didn't need me as much, that you were strong enough." He wiped his eyes. "But that was a lie I told myself so I wouldn't have to face how much I was hurting. I favored him. I celebrated him louder because it was easier, and I pushed you aside. Tonight what I said, what I did, it was unforgivable." I listened quietly, letting him speak. Years of pain surfaced, but so did something else, a strange sense of release. Hey, if you've ever waited decades for a parent to finally see you, if you've carried the weight of being overlooked by the person who was supposed to love you most, you know how complicated this kind of conversation feels. It doesn't erase the past, but it can begin to heal it. Type healing begins if you believe in second chances. "I read some of your old letters last night," he admitted. "The ones you sent from overseas that I never fully opened. I stayed up until sunrise reading every word. You were reaching out to me all those years and I wasn't there." His shoulders shook. "You were always enough, Lauren. More than enough. The problem was never you, it was me." We stood in silence for a while, the river lights reflecting in his tear-filled eyes. I didn't rush to forgive him. I simply said, "Thank you for saying that. It matters." Ryan joined us later. He looked exhausted. He apologized too, for staying silent all these years, for enjoying the role of the golden child, for not standing up when it counted. The three of us talked longer than we had in decades, not perfectly, not magically, but honestly. For the first time, I felt seen by both of them. A few days after the ceremony, I drove alone to the small cemetery just outside Charlottesville where my mother rests. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges. I placed fresh white lilies beside her headstone and sat on the grass under the old oak tree she loved so much. I told her everything, the humiliation, the senator, my father's tears, the quiet apologies. For the first time in years, I cried freely, not from pain but from a deep sense of release. "Mom, they finally saw me," I whispered. The breeze moved gently through the leaves, and in that moment I felt her presence stronger than ever. Healing didn't happen overnight. It's still happening. My father has started showing up differently, small gestures at first. He calls more often, asks real questions about my work, and listens without redirecting the conversation. Ryan and I are slowly rebuilding our relationship too. We've had honest talks about the past, about the roles we played, and about choosing better moving forward. A few weeks later, we had our first real family dinner in a long time. No performances, no spotlight, just the three of us around the table. My father saved the seat beside him for me. When I sat down, he looked at me with eyes full of quiet regret and said softly, "You've always belonged here, Lauren. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." Hey, if you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or invisible in your own family, if you've carried the weight of conditional love for years, I want you to know this. Your worth was never up for debate. You don't have to scream to be seen. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is keep building your life with quiet excellence until the truth can no longer be ignored. And if you're a parent watching this, please take a moment today to really see all your children, not just the ones who are loudest or easiest to understand. This journey taught me that revenge isn't always about making someone hurt. Sometimes it's about living so fully and authentically that the people who once diminished you are finally forced to confront the truth and then giving them a chance to grow. Thank you for sitting with me through this story. If it touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear they are enough. Your value has never depended on anyone else's ability to recognize it. You are seen, you are worthy, and you always have been.